Welcome back, adventurer. This week's creatures have been described as a giant forest ape, the soul of a child trapped in a ship, and the most gorgeous seal you'll ever lay eyes on. So come, pull up a stool at Creature Tavern. Adventurer, your arrival couldn't have been timed any better. Quick, grab that jar. There we go. Lid. Perfect. Turns out, wither rat king guts retain a little more life than I first thought. Now grab a seat and take this tale as thanks. Let's venture forth into lore on the Sasquatch from North American folklore. The Sasquatch is a veritable household name these days, with all the titles to boot. We've got the arguably more famous Bigfoot, Wild Man, Ape Man, Gorilla Man, Mountain Devil, Fairy Man, Tree Peekers, the benevolent spirit of the forest, if you fancy a mouthful, and my personal favourite, the Woodland Ape. The earliest written account of this famous fairy friend dates many years previous, to 1811, from US explorer David Thompson. However, the creature's true start is heard in the oral history of many Native American tribes, indicating an origin far older than the written record. When asking round about this giant ape man, I had a lovely Warden of the Willows swing by, and boy, did she spill an incredible pint of information. I believe her name was Deborah Danhauer, and she said the Sasquatch is best summarised in 3 words: large, muscular, and bipedal. It's a human-ape combo creature covered in hair that's usually coloured black, dark brown, or a dark reddish. For their standing, the Warden told me that's usually around 6 to 9 foot, but some lucky explorers have reported some isolated encounters with creatures reaching a towering 10 to 15 foot, and with an eyed weight of upwards of 500 pounds. Common features include broad shoulders, no visible neck, no invisible neck either for that matter, and long arms. The full-bodied form is covered in a shaggy hair, except for the hands, feet, and a good portion of the face, which are completely bare. Many folks I spoke with agreed with the good Warden, on the face in particular, that it looks disturbingly close to a human's, but with a few features plucked from the shelves in reality's back room. A distinctly broad jaw. Supposedly small ears. They may be bigger, but it's hard to tell, as they're always hidden by hair, and eyes entirely consumed by the final yellow of twilight. Other books and diaries chronicle a vision of beast. The overall size and shape remains the same, but the eyes take a violent blood hue, and its maw is gaping and overflowing with a silky thick saliva. A noted olfactory detail comes from Michael Rugg, owner of the Bigfoot Discovery Museum. He claims the smell is like a skunk that had rolled around in dead animals and had hung around the garbage pits. And of course, how could we chat about Bigfoot without talking about the big feet? Tracker reports tell me these famous footprints are said to measure around 24 inches long and 8 inches wide. If you want to track a Sasquatch yourself, then you're going to need to strap on your hiking boots and grab the bug spray as you're heading out into the wilderness. Bigfoot are said to inhabit the forests of North America, especially the dense rain-soaked Pacific Northwest. The Adirondack Mountains are frequently mentioned as a hotspot for activity, while Willow Creek in North Carolina is, from what I've read, the most popular setting for sightings. Or you could head to the Washington Mountain Range, to an area near Mount St. Helens. Perhaps you know it by its new handle, Ape Canyon. Once your fortune changes, either way, and now you're in proximity with a woodland ape, the picture that'll emerge is one of an incredibly strong, usually elusive, forest dweller. Often peaceful in disposition, yet more than capable of hostility. Witnesses insist you won't see them unless they want you to. And folks describe a creature that sneaks and stalks within its territory. They may watch you from the trees, advance silently, despite their size, or shadow travellers, without ever revealing themselves. I'm told you're especially vulnerable at night, as some believe Sasquatch appear to be adapted for nocturnal vision, though this point is highly contested from what I can tell. Many passages of law frequently note a distinctive compliant gait, rather than a stiff human stride. The Sasquatch are said to walk bent-legged, almost like snowshoeing, a style of movement that suppresses the usual bob of the upper body. Folks say this uncanny form of locomotion makes the Bigfoot appear as if it's floating across the ground. Having said that, I have been assured by many that Sasquatch definitely do not float, hover, or glide in any way. But they do talk. Alleged vocalizations span howls, screams, moans, grunts, and whistles. Some law says they may have their own language, said to sound human adjacent, like a beast attempting to mimic man. Another patch of law talks of a skill referred to as wood knocking, and this woodland technique involves striking trees with other bits of wood, rocks, or their own palms, and it's thought to be a form of communication, and a rather stealthy one at that. When it comes to confrontation, I'm told Sasquatch throw rocks and logs, really whatever they can get their hands on, as a warning. It could be you're looking a little scary yourself, or you're about to enter tree peaker territory and they really don't want you to. Should you misunderstand or ignore these arguably obvious hints, and you continue to advance on the giant rock-hurling ape man, then you're possibly in for a pretty bad time. Found a few records that claim Sasquatch twist the heads off their prey. Usually deer, though some folks did extend that to humans. And there's claims that its hide is so tough, or maybe it's the hair being so thick, that shot and swords cannot penetrate it. So I'd advise you do your best to avoid a big hairy hand around your neck. You know what they say, prevention is better than trying to stitch a head back onto a neck. However, it may not be so easy to avoid an encounter, as I read many reports of Bigfoot wandering into human camps to steal salmon, or worse, the people themselves, while they sleep. This behaviour is noted well in an account from 1957 by Canadian prospector Albert Ostman. The tale's a long one, so I'll summarise it for you. One cloudy night, while Albert was tucked away neatly in his sleeping bag, the worst happened. He awoke to find himself being carried, sleeping bag and all, by a powerful, coughing, two-legged creature of the woods. He reckons he was carried for 3 hours, after which he was dumped in a small, mountain-ringed basin. Crawling out from his bed-turned bundle, he discovered 4 of these creatures, seemingly naked and covered in hair. So obviously he took them for a Sasquatch family, identifying a large male and female and 2 young'uns. He was there quite a while, nearly a full week it seems, observing their foraging habits and how they spoke. It was a rather good, if not terrifying opportunity to study the Sasquatch up close. But as he only had what was kept in his sleeping bag, supplies quickly ran low. He needed a plan to escape. so he began cautiously befriending the youths with trinkets and makeshift tools. Then he baited the older male with a full box of snuff. And when the creature fell violently ill from the poison gift, Albert bolted, firing a warning shot to deter chase. He fled down a canyon, climbed ridges, used Mount Baker as his anchor, and endured a canny rough night in the open wilderness. Before hearing his salvation, Albert states, "I could hear a motor running hard at times, then stop. I listened to this for a while and decided the sound was from a gas donkey. Someone was logging in the neighbourhood. I told them I was a prospector and I was lost. I did not like to tell them I had been kidnapped by a Sasquatch, as if I had, they would probably have said, 'He's crazy too.' The following day, I went down from this camp on Salmon Arm Branch of Sechelt Inlet, and from there, I got the Union boat back to Vancouver. That was my last prospecting trip." Quite the tale, and it's definitely the most detailed encounter. But when it comes to Bigfoot stories, there's as many of them as the night is dark. And after reading a hefty share, I've selected 3 others as what I consider to be the most interesting of all. We have one account from 1893 in the Bitterroot Mountains from Theodore Roosevelt. In The Wilderness Hunter, Roosevelt recounts frontierman Bauman's story. Repeated nighttime harassment at a remote trapping camp by a bipedal, what he refers to as goblin beast. Large human-like tracks around the tents were seen, and the later discovery of Bauman's partner dead with signs of a violent struggle, prompting Bauman to flee. Another account from July in 1924 takes us to Ape Canyon. This is from Fred Beck and his fellow miners. After days of seeing giant footprints and glimpses of what he describes as ape men, the miners said their cabin was besieged at night by multiple creatures, throwing rocks and trying to break in. The men fired shots and escaped at daylight. And arguably the most famous encounter of a Bigfoot comes from October 20th, 1967. We're in Bluff Creek, California. This is from Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. While on horseback along the creek, the pair reported encountering a tall, hair-covered bipedal figure. Patterson dismounted immediately and filmed roughly a minute or so of footage as the creature walked away across a sandbar. Anyone familiar with Bigfoot will recognise this clip as the most famous and most widely discussed piece of Bigfoot evidence. So what, if anything, can you do when you're face to face with the benevolent spirit of the forest? Well, it turns out there's a decent handful of little tips. Some folks say you should treat it like a bear. Don't make eye contact with the creature and back up slowly. Turning heel and running will only trigger a pursuit instinct. However, if you're with a companion, someone you're not that close with, and you reckon you can run faster than them, then go for it. Also, do not lunge for your weapon. Move to it with a smooth, calm motion, and hope the giant isn't familiar with its use. According to law, you won't have much luck piercing its flesh, but the eyes and mouth remain squishy. So if you're feeling brave, direct your blade to those areas. And there's many, many others who say they're highly intelligent creatures. And if you're no danger to them, they're no danger to you. By the way, looks like a spot of the Rat King bile landed on your skin. Yeah, you're going to want to wash that off like 10 minutes ago. Ahoy hoy dear listener, welcome to my ship of dreams, where in place of sea, we sail on here. Thanks for listening to episode 25 of Creature Tavern. We've nearly got a whole 24 hours worth of stories out now, so if you're ever sat with a day free and nothing to do, why not drown yourself in this growing media ocean? Let me know what you enjoyed drowning in by posting about the show using the hashtag Creature Tavern on X or Blue Sky. Doing so will give me a questionable list of things to read, and there's a chance that your name will appear on the show, much like Deborah from today's episode. I really hope I pronounced your surname correctly. I tried a few times, I think I got it correct, but apologies if I did not. You could end up a ghost in need of human form to help solve their death, but you're only able to possess a single limb at a time. Or perhaps you'll be a plum, cursed with a taste for human flesh. Either way, you'll end up a whimsical creature of myth. And isn't that really what everyone truly wants? And if you're hanging out with us on YouTube, leave a comment, and you too could perhaps be a fruit with a questionable desire for something it'll never have. Now, since we're on this audible dream ship, remember that? How we started all this? Why not gather a few friends and family? Bring them round for a shanty. And by shanty, I mean tell them about the show. Get on a boat, take them out into the deep, dark waters of the Pacific, and advise they give this wonderful place a listen. Or you're not turning back. Well, it's about time you raise the anchor and set sail for another creature. But before that, let's get you back to the tavern. Whoa, stayed in the skin, has it? Well, I'm sure it's fine. Oh, it's turning gelatinous. Let's take your mind off that little dippy with tales of the Klabautermann from Dutch folklore. Flying the flag, Klafter, Kutterman, Kotterman, Potterman, Cobalt, the soul of the ship, or seafaring ghost. This creature is a water spirit. First penned about in the early 1770s. In the ancient book of seafaring beliefs, Klabautermann are expressly classified as a ship kobold, a being inseparable from the vessel it dwells within. Maritime writer Herman Sergo encapsulates its significance by describing the Klabautermann as the very soul of the ship. Legend says Klabautermann are present from the laying of the keel or the first riveted plates, dubbing itself as guardian of the vessel. How these seafaring spectres become bonded to a craft is explained through several traditional tales, all centering on wood as the living conduit. One tells that if a stillborn or unbaptized child is buried in the heath beneath a tree, and that tree later supplies as shipwood, the child's soul is transferred aboard as the Klabautermann. A related suspicion from the island of Rügen says that a child with a fracture can be passed over a split oak tree 3 times at sunrise. When the oak is bound and allowed to grow, the mended child's soul comes to dwell in that timber. Other folks treat the haunt as a nature spirit, a being already taken life within the wood. With these origins, it's said the Klabautermann comes right with the wood. But this isn't always the case. Some hardbacks detail summoning rites needed to secure the watery ghost's patronage. One ritual says the captain must take the first wood chips produced during the ship's construction, prick his left forefinger, allow 3 drops of blood to fall into the chips, and place them upon the new vessel. Another practice says the owner of the vessel must keep the first chip on their chest until the ship is complete, and this is when the spirit hatches. Descriptions on what this briny boo looks like vary depending on the region, but each tale preserves a consistent sailory silhouette, typically manifesting as a small humanoid figure, noted as carrying a tobacco pipe, wearing a nightcap-style sailor's cap, and a red or grey jacket. Another myth conjures a fiery red-headed, white-bearded sprite, with teeth as sickly green, dressed up in yellow breeches, riding boots, and a steeple-crowned, pointed hat. And according to the law of Pomeranian, that's a historical region on the southern shore of the Baltic Sea, in Central Europe, split between Poland and Germany. Klabautermann are about 2 feet tall, clad in a red jacket, sailors' wide trousers, and a round hat. Though I did find more than a few reports that say it's still this 2 foot size with a tobacco pipe, but completely naked. These maritime manifestations are felt strongest around the North Sea and the Baltic, but the spirit's tied to the ship, not a specific patch of aqua. In the stories, it goes wherever the ship sails. Pacific, Atlantic, even far-flung routes. So you're going to need your sea legs handy if you fancy catching waves with this wet wonder. Klabautermann behaviour is defined by an unfortunate fusion of guardian and omen. Sailors shared lore that one will only reveal itself when the vessel it calls body is doomed to sink. Because of this, it quickly became rumour that to see one is bad luck. Fun fact, by the 19th century, the mere sight of a Klabautermann was considered to be the most feared vision at sea. To help keep the creature happy and hidden, crews would sometimes carve its likeness into wood and fix the sculpture to the mast as a token of good fortune. Its invisible presence is said to ward off illness, fire, even pirate attacks. But there comes an inevitable point when the spirit judges a vessel as no longer seaworthy, and this is when it shows itself, right before taking leave. And if the folks aboard have got their wits about them, they do the same. As the ship's bound to sink, and according to law, there's literally nothing anyone can do to prevent this fate. Most of the time the spook keeps to its post as surrogate caretaker of the vessel, quietly making itself useful whenever the ship's in disrepair, preventing disaster through tireless, practical aid. They've been known to pump water from the hold, arrange cargo to better organise and tidy the place, or shift ballasts, that's the heavy material, such as gravel, sand or iron, held in the ship's bilge to ensure stability, and hammer at leaks wherever they spring up. All until the carpenter or appropriate crew hand arrives. Even had a few sailor types tell me they found gear, broken by day, mysteriously mended by night. However, it ain't all kind repairs. This helpful ship hand has been known to shift its outlook to a mischief maker or strict disciplinary if the crew grow careless with their tackle. A Klabautermann will prankishly tangle the lines if its mood turns foul, and it signals its displeasure with disruption, throwing firewood about, rapping on the hull, breaking objects, and even slapping wayward crewmen. And there are some traditions that lean further towards the sinister, blaming Klabautermann for things going wrong rather than repair, painting it as more demon or goblin than guardian. With all the magic and mystery surrounding Klabautermann, I bet you'd love to see one without courting doom. Well, I happen to hear a trick for this from a few salty dogs. One oral account says you'll need to go alone at night, specifically between midnight and 1, and head for the capstan hole. This is the great big piece of metal or timber, often found on the top deck. It'd have a rope wrapped around it, with an anchor on one end, and crew would insert rods into it, turning it to reel the anchor in. Well, you've got to peer through those rod holes, and the Klabautermann will show. But take heed. Should the guest appear nude, do not offer clothing, as pity will enrage it. I briefly mentioned earlier that Klabautermann abandon a ship when it truly passes the point of rescue. And I can see from your panicked look, you've been wondering if there's any signs that give away this impending finale. Turns out there is. A few shanties see their spirit's behaviour becomes unmistakably ominous. A poltergeist even. They can be heard relentlessly running up and down the mast's ladder, rattling ropes. The hold will echo with strained groans. And finally, it'll climb to the tip of the bowsprit or foremast and dive off, splashing into the sea. At which point, I'd advise you find a lifeboat or some barrel, because the ship's going down. In general, Klabautermann are incredibly friendly and handy little sprites to have. But their kindness does come with conditions. So here's how you can ensure this relationship doesn't sink. Be respectful. Many sailors believed strongly in respecting the Klabautermann. In fact, I found one report demonstrating just this. It speaks of a crew that threw their captain overboard for denying the existence of the ship's Klabautermann. Be kind. Heinrich Heine, a German poet and writer from the 18th and 19th century, reported that one captain created a place for his ship's Klabautermann in his cabin, and he would often offer the spirit the best food and drink he had aboard. And if your Klabautermann is starting to act up, it's thought that reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards will bring order to an anxious Klabautermann. You know, I reckon I could do with a Klabautermann around here some days. And looking at your arm, you could probably do with an underpriest. Or maybe a sharp knife would be quicker. Hang on a sec. Welcome to the second and final pit stop for this episode. What'll it be? A full tank? Or are you one of those folks that reckons the Doritos at a petrol station are definitely best? That's all we got here. Petrol and Doritos. Oh, and we've buckled your car while you're parked. To get that lifted, you're going to need to hit the subscribe button. I know, it sounds kind of hostagey. And that's because it is. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere meter mallards make their nests. Just search for Creature Tavern. And while you're waiting for the unclamping, why not drum up a few words on your time here? Not just for me to read, but for all the lovely new listeners you'll attract with your dazzling command of the texted word. Now it looks like we're just about to get that new wheel on for you. So here's where we say goodbye. But only to this version. You'll see the original model soon, as we get you back to the tavern. How was I supposed to know the priest was going to do that? Look, let's not point fingers at who gave who a plagued rat king. Just please, try not to bleed on the counter, while I loudly whisper rejuvenating tales of our last creature for the week. The Selkie, from Scottish Folklore. These slippery beings I've just called Selkie do have a few alternative sounds you can use, like silkies, silkies with a Y, or selchies. Regardless of your choice, The name comes from the Scottish word for seal. But where do these seal folk come from, I hear you cry? Well, from what I've found, they're either ordinary humans who in life committed great sin and their souls moved into seal instead of the afterlife. And other stories stick with this ethereal theme, claiming they're fallen angels. In human guise, Selkies of either gender are depicted as the most incredibly attractive humans you'll ever lay eyes on. As seals, folks say they're greater in size than the average grey seal, more like the size of a Greenland seal, yet with the appearance of a harbour seal. So let's hope your knowledge on seals is there, otherwise I can make anything up. The body is torpedo-shaped, with broad, webbed hind flippers, and a couple of smaller ones in the front for steering. Those fore flippers measure roughly 23 to 28 centimetres, and the hind 35 to 45 centimetres. And their mass falls somewhere between 100 to 170 kilograms. The head is round, with a dog-like snout, and large, widely set eyes. And their coat ranges from a grey to charcoal, with a dense scattering of pale rings and irregular spots over the back and flanks, shading to a lighter tone on the underside. Unsurprisingly, the seal cryptid looks exactly like a seal. Selkies belong to the cold rim of the North Atlantic. By day, folks swear they lay among grey seal rookeries, bathing in the sun and blending in with kin removed. By night, I'm told they slip ashore. I'd say get yourself to the beaches of Orkney and look for places where sea meets sand. So caves, tidal pools, and hidden coves are likely to be their favourite haunts. This greasy gang is mostly known for their ability to shapeshift between seal and human, and for the unique method of transformation. You see, unlike many of the monsters we've covered in previous visits, there's no quick shift or agonising reorganisation of bone and muscle. For Selkies, it's as simple as removing or putting on their seal skin, slipping into it like an already buttoned up coat. And it's said each skin is unique and irreplaceable. You could say, whoever controls the skin controls the seal. Remember that little saying, as this control plays quite a role in many tales of the Selkie. Lore states they're just as likely to be friendly and helpful to humans as they are dangerous and vengeful. But most entries on female Selkies cast them as trapped hearts, frequently entering romantic or adult relationships with humans. And such unions sometimes result in children. Unfortunately for the Selkies, most often these bonds are coerced. The human usually steals or hides their seal skin, forcing a marriage and preventing the Selkies' return to sea. As you'd expect, these marriages are typically unhappy. Not only has the Selkie been held against their will, but lore states they have an eternal ache for the ocean's embrace. To paint a happy twist on things, in all these tales, eventually, the Selkie will escape the moment its skin is found. But ever the romantic, Selkie are rumoured to return once a year to visit her land children, though her trust for man has ended as she remains in seal form, waving from afar. Stories run a little shorter for the male variant. Seems their roles are swapped. Here the male Selkies use their seductive power to woo human women. Caught in the shallows, for women in unhappy or disappointing marriages with old fishermen. Now I can see from your expression, you're dying to know what shape the offspring of these shoreline unions take. Well, folks say children born between man and seal folk have webbed hands, and the offspring of male Selkies and human women are said to have webbed toes as well. And if the webbing's ever cut, a rough and rigid growth will take its place. Though an account from Scottish writer Ernest Marwick, 1915, says the little will possess green-white skin that's cracked in various places across the body, and worse, a fishy odour spills from these fleshy fissures. Marwick also cites a story in his book, The Folklore of Orkney and Shetland, of a woman who falls in love with a male Selkie, later giving birth to a son who allegedly has the face of a seal. The story goes on to say the mother has a dream that reveals where to find silver after the birth, though I couldn't find any other tales to back up this treasure-tracking power. As to when seal people may walk ashore, legends argue quite a bit. Some claim the tides tell when a Selkie can walk the land. According to one fella, a Selkie can assume human form only once every 7 years because their bodies house condemned souls. And in Shetland stories, Selkies may lure islanders into the sea instead, specifically at midsummer. And in these tales, the lovelorn never return to dry land. Apart from during midsummer, Selkies are essentially harmless. However, I've still got a few tips for how to handle the encounter, should you fancy a trip to the Scottish shore. Be observant. If you're by the beach in the beautiful land of Scotland, and you see a completely naked man or woman beckoning you towards the sea, don't go. It's pretty obvious. Even if you can't see a hollow seal skin, that's just good advice. And also do your best not to harm a Selkie, as it's thought that killing one opens the door of misfortune for the perpetrator. And with that, we're finished with our last creature for the week. We've learned that stuffing a week's worth of food in your sleeping bag isn't as crazy as it sounds, to always get your shipbuilding material from a child cemetery, and stealing sealskin might just fetch you a sea wife. Now that bell means it's last call here at Creature Tavern. So grab yourself one more drink for the road. And until next time, tread carefully, adventurer. You never know when you might wander into the weird.